Hey, I'm Catherine. Thanks for joining me at Air Necessities, the podcast that turns complex financial language into real talk for Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z inheritors. I am a certified financial planner, an investment advisor, and an inheritor, just like you. Each episode of this podcast, I am breaking down some of the most complex topics related to generational wealth and inheritance. Listen in to get the information you need as a current or future inheritor and learn how to manage your financial life yourself and not make decisions by asking Google what to do. On today's episode of the podcast, we're talking about how to grow your financial literacy as an inheritor. This topic is for current and future inheritors alike, and it is by far and away one of the biggest questions that I get asked in my role as Sunny Branch. It's one of the biggest issues that I have prospective clients coming in to talk to me about. To name that issue, it's the fact that you feel like you have this huge amount of wealth, whether you've already inherited it or you expect it's going to be coming to you in the future, but you have no idea how to manage money. You were never taught financial literacy. You might not have even learned basic financial literacy, let alone all of the skills that wealthy people have to manage their wealth. You don't understand how investing works. You don't understand the legal and the tax structures that surround your current or future inheritance. You feel like you're flying blind. And it's not something that is easy to talk about, because if you've gotten to this point where you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s and feeling this way, it's probably because your parents aren't a huge help in terms of your own financial literacy. If you had parents who were able to effectively communicate these topics and work to grow your financial literacy as their child, you probably wouldn't be in this position where you're looking for this information. So you need to find these resources yourself, but where? You can't talk to your friends about this. You can't talk to them about their $30 million inheritance or their parents' wealth, because most people don't have this issue. It's not a common issue that you can just talk to any friend about. A lot of investment advisors, especially if you haven't inherited yet, don't care about you. They're not going to work with you. They might work with you after you've inherited, right? But they don't care about educating you now. There are not a lot of people in the financial industry that do what I do at Sunny Branch, which, yes, is also to help current inheritors manage their inheritance, to manage their investments, but also to help current and future inheritors grow their financial knowledge, their financial literacy, and grow their understanding and comfort with topics related to inheritance. And that's what I'm going to be giving you an overview of today. Some of the most important concepts that you need to understand as either a current or a future inheritor, and also places where you can get more information and what you can do if you want to keep educating yourself and keep growing in this journey. The very first thing that I always start with, no matter who I'm talking to, are the very basic building blocks of financial literacy. And no matter how much money you have, these building blocks are the same. They are about income, saving, and spending. And these are the three things. Yes, it's basic, but these are the first three things that you need to understand, whether you're a current or future inheritor. You need to understand how much money you have coming in, how much money you're spending, and how much money left over is being saved. And then you need to understand where that money that's being saved is going, if it's being invested, how it's being invested, and how it's growing over time. This sounds really simple, and some people listening are probably rolling their eyes right now, but it's actually really hard, especially if you've already inherited. If you were living off of a salary and it was really stable and you knew how much your paycheck was going to be every week, and now you have an inheritance, even if it's a very large inheritance, 20, 30, $40 million, you don't necessarily understand how much money is going to be coming off of that inheritance, how much cash flow that you're going to have on an annual basis. And it can also be very, very different depending on what the assets that you've inherited are. So the first piece that anyone needs to understand is that income, the saving, and the spending piece. Once you understand that, The next steps are a little bit different for current and future inheritors. And I'm not going to go through the basic building blocks of financial planning. If people have questions there, I think there are a lot of great resources that cover that. So I'm going to stop after I talk about the save, spend, and income conversation. And I want to move towards more topics that are specifically focused on inheritors. We'll start with some of the key financial literacy concepts that future inheritors need. And a lot of these are maybe not exactly financial literacy. I'll call them more inheritance literacy. And this is a lot of work and education that you need to do if you're trying to have these estate planning and inheritance conversations with your parents. For a lot of people, their parents are not willing to have these conversations with them. They still see you as a child. And because of these fear-based messages that they're getting from their advisors, if you have more questions about those, you can check out a couple episodes ago. I talk all about why your parents won't talk to you about their estate plan. You need to really come to them as an educated party and say, I've done my homework, I've done my research, I understand all of these concepts. Now, let's have a conversation about this as adults. Yes, I'm your child and you want to protect me in certain ways and you don't want to share your information with me, that's fine, but there are some things that I need to know from a logistical perspective. If you're a future inheritor in this situation, you're going to want to focus on understanding the mechanics of estate transfer for high and ultra high net worth families. There are a key few terms that you need to understand. And if you listen to this episode and you feel like you want to dive a little deeper, I do have the 20 terms inheritors absolutely need to know. You can download it from my website. So that I would say is a fantastic complement to what I'm about to tell you. And I'll also link it in the show notes below. So the first thing you need to understand is the kinds of documents that your parents may have in place about their estate plan. So I'm talking about wills, trusts, powers of attorney, and a medical power of attorney or a healthcare proxy. Your parents might not have all four of these, but most people are, and most wealthy families especially, are going to have all four of these documents. And they have a different interplay. They all have a different role in the estate transfer process. A will governs your parents' entire estate, and it provides specific instructions legally for how the estate should be distributed. A trust is slightly more specific and also endures longer. A will gives instructions for a specific event, the disposition of an estate, but a trust could last generations, decades and decades into the future. And those two documents therefore have different roles in the estate settlement process, but they could be equally relevant to you as your parent's heir. Power of attorney is a form that gives an individual authority to act on behalf of someone else, and a medical power of attorney or a healthcare proxy is a similar document, but it gives someone permission to make medical decisions on behalf of someone else. So the power of attorney and healthcare proxy or medical power of attorney are documents that could come into play if your parents are incapacitated at the end of their lives, but that aren't going to matter after they die. And the will and the trust are two of the documents that are really going to matter after your parents die. And if you have built your knowledge, you understand how these documents work, then you can go to your parents and you can tell them, I've learned about these four different documents, why they're really important. Can you share what you've done and what the provisions are in these documents? Who have you named as executor in your will? If you have a trust, who's the trustee of the trust? What are the terms of the trust? Are there any specific gifts that I should know about in either the will or the trust? Any provisions that might not be what I expect or that you want to make sure I understand or you explain before you pass away? Who have you named as power of attorney? Who have you named as medical power of attorney? And just keep asking them questions like this, questions to start to understand what their wishes are. And the important thing here as you work to build your knowledge and your literacy in the inheritance space is that when people talk about inheritance, they often talk about money, but we are not talking about dollar values here, especially if your parents are hesitant to share information with you. We are not poking at how much money do you have, how much money am I going to get. We are poking at the logistics of what is going to happen after they die. If you've already inherited, then some of this is going to be very relevant depending on where you are in this process, and some of it might not be. If you're a current inheritor and you're going through the estate settlement process right now, then you have a huge amount of financial knowledge and financial literacy that you need to learn in a very short amount of time, because you're learning about the role of executor, you're learning about all of these different account types that your parents had, how all those different account types are going to transfer, what the tax implications are for all of those accounts. So you have just a huge volume of information that you need to learn in a very short amount of time. And in this episode, I can't sit here and explain all of that information to you. Honestly, it is a lot of information. I can't cover it all in 5 minutes. But what I want to encourage you to do is to check out my other episodes, check out my Instagram, check out my blog, because I have a lot of deep dives on these specific topics. So on the specifics of taxation after inheritance, of different account types, how different accounts transfer, what you could be looking at as an inheritor if you have assets coming through a will or assets coming through a trust. What I want to focus on for my current inheritors is more the people that you need to reach out to and the roles that you need to understand. Because these roles are the places that you are going to be able to get information from as you move throughout the process. In your parents' will, they will have named an executor or a personal representative. And that is the person, again, who's legally responsible for fully distributing their estate and making sure that it all complies with their wishes as they were laid out in the will. That person is going to have primary responsibility and a lot of control over the process of estate settlement. So they are going to be the first resource, the first place that you can go for questions. The other person who might play a role in this is a trustee. If your parents had a trust that already existed or a trust that was created upon their death, the trustee is also going to have a lot of specific information about that trust. And so if you have specific trust questions, then the trustee is the person that you would go to there. That might be an individual or it might be a corporate trustee. You're also going to be getting information depending on your role in the estate settlement process from your parents' attorney and your parents' CPA. I want to emphasize again that there are going to be a lot of questions that you have. Even if you inherited years ago and you have now, you're through that estate settlement process, you're more on the side of managing your assets and thinking about managing an inheritance, there are still questions that come up because people don't talk about this and people don't teach you these skills. There are so few places that you can go to learn these skills. So what I want to leave you with, if you've listened to the end of this video and you feel like, oh man, you gave me some tips, but I really still don't know what I'm doing here, is that is normal. You can't listen to one 15-minute podcast episode and then say, oh, all right, I'm ready to go, because you have a new job, you have a new skill set that you're trying to learn, and that is kind of a longer term process. It's not something that happens quickly, and it is confusing and it is frustrating and it is overwhelming. I have the resources to help you. I've got a lot more videos and episodes in the podcast coming on this topic. If you have specific questions that you're struggling with, you can send me a DM at SunnyBranchWealth on Instagram. You can send me an email, Catherine@SunnyBranchWealth.com. You can hop onto my website, send me an email through the contact form, or grab time on my Calendly. The links to all those things are in the show notes below. But I want to hear from you what issues you're struggling with and what you want help with. And that's the way that I can make this podcast the best resource it can be for all of my current and future inheritors, is if you share with me the issues and the questions that you're really wondering about. I'll hope to hear from you soon. And if you don't have any specific questions, you can catch me in 2 weeks on the next episode of Heir Necessities.